Rainbow Reflections, Book 1, A Kind of Magic, Chapter 31, The Loser in the End. The counseling office could be entered from both the courtyard and the small administration hallway. The lemon-scented office was dedicated to a small waiting area and 2 private rooms. A frog oil was always stationed in the waiting room to set up appointments if students needed counseling. Hyaktu wished that he had received an appointment request from C3 at any point during the year. The boy was now sitting across from him in one of the private rooms, the door closed. "So, you had a mirror shard," Hyaktu said, watching C3 closely. C3 made no response, but stared at his black shoes. "You had plenty of mirror shards. You've been putting them together all semester to make the mirror whole again," Hyaktu went on. "Why didn't you tell me you had found mirror shards?" C3 remained silent. Hyaktu sighed. "C3, you're making this very difficult to figure out what happened. I've heard my children's accounts of how you put together the mirror. I just want to understand why. If you do not speak, I'm afraid I will have to expel you from the school, under suspicions of working with the spirits willingly." C3's eyes widened as he flicked his gaze up to Hyaktu at last. "If you tell me what happened, even if you are working with the spirits, I will not expel you," Hyaktu went on. "I will help you with whatever problem you might be facing. I will see this from your point of view. But if you do not tell me anything, I cannot help you, and I cannot trust you to remain at the school." C3 nodded slowly, straightened his white-collared shirt, then took a deep breath.
"Sorry, Mr. Sihon.
We all make mistakes, C3. I'm not going to be angry with you for telling the truth, for admitting your mistakes."
Okay,"
C3 said in a very small voice. Hyaktu sat back in his wooden chair, allowing C3 to take over the conversation once he felt ready. C3 waited a few more moments, clearly trying to gather his thoughts. Then he began, his mismatched eyes looking anywhere but at Hyaktu.
I first found out about the spirits during the moonlight dance. I wanted a break, so I went outside for some fresh air. But then I saw something in the garden. I went to take a look. It was a spirit, but it didn't stick around long enough for me to get closer. Sarala saw me looking for it, and I thought she might have seen the spirit too. I was hoping she'd want to help me look for it.
"Why?" Hyaktu asked, frowning. C3 twiddled his thumbs together and stared at his feet.
I thought maybe we could be friends,
he said in a low voice.
I haven't had a friend this entire semester.
"I believe people tend to be turned off by your blunt words," Hyaktu said. C3 fidgeted uneasily. "What happened next?" Hyaktu pressed. "You saw the spirits, but they left, right?" C3 nodded.
I left the garden, but then I saw it again. It was transparent and glowing. It was in the form of fog, or at least that's how it appeared. I watched it float up to your tower, to the 5th floor. It went right through the window. I didn't have my wand on me, since wands were not permitted at the dance. So I went back to my room to grab it, and by the time I was outside again, there weren't too many students outside. They had either left the dance completely or went back inside. But nobody was around, so I used my wand to lift me into the air. I was right outside the window. It was a bit difficult to open the window and hold my magic at the same time, but I managed to do it.
Did you find the spirit when you trespassed into Sorala's room? Hyaktu asked, stressing the fact that C3 had certainly broken a rule. C3 noticed this and narrowed his eyes as he looked up at Hyaktu.
Sorala broke down my door and trespassed into my room. I'd say we're even.
She was aware of a security issue, Hyaktu said.
If the mirror shards were such a matter of importance, so dangerous, then why did you not alert the students? If I knew they were dangerous...
I did not want to alarm anybody, since only the one had been found, and nothing had happened with it for months. Please continue with your story, Hyaktu interrupted. C3 sighed.
Fine,
he muttered, pushing his left sleeve up his arm, though it was still tucked away in the golden ring. The ring that apparently held enchantments.
I didn't find the spirit. I tried calling to it, telling it that I wasn't going to hurt it. I told it that I wanted to meet it. The next day, right before we were all allowed to go home to our families for winter break, I found a mirror shard in my room.
Your room? Hyaktu asked with a frown. I only had the frog oils check the public spaces, not the student quarters. No wonder they didn't find anything then. C3 nodded.
I thought it had to be connected to the spirit. I asked aloud if it was the spirits, and the fog-looking thing appeared. It told me in such a weak voice that it needed my help to assemble the mirror shards.
Why would they ask this of you? Hyaktu queried, fingering his mustache.
It told me that it was stuck in that fog-looking form if I didn't get the mirror together,
C3 said.
I told it I would help it. It was pathetically fragile. It clearly needed some assistance, and since I've always wanted to see a spirit...
Hyaktu nodded. You do anything to keep them under your eye for research purposes, he said. So the spirits continue to give you mirror shards? C3 shrugged.
Yes and no,
he replied.
It tried to give me the mirror shards, but when it pulled them out from wherever it had them, or created them, or however it obtained them, the mirror shards wouldn't always end up in my room. There'd be pieces all over the school, which I'd need to locate. Once I attained the pieces, I brought them to my room and put them all together like a puzzle. It was a bit hard at first, but once I got more pieces, I was able to figure it out.
The spirits never said where these mirror shards came from? Hyaktu pressed, leaning forward. C3 shook his head.
I assumed they were coming from somewhere else, though. If the spirit was creating them itself, how would it have lost them all over the school?
They could have been doing that on purpose, to see how loyal you be, Hyaktu thought grimly.
The last mirror shard I took, the one Zin saw and Sorala broke down my door over, was in the art studio.
And how did you get the spirits to come through?
I did not know that was going to happen,
admitted C3, looking Hyaktu in the eye.
I swear, I did not know. The spirit never told me that would happen. The spirit wasn't even in my room when I had followed its last instructions. It was sleeping in the object it claimed to be possessing, which I assumed was in Sorala's room, since that's where I saw it go.
What last instructions were these? Hyaktu asked, his violet eyes narrowing.
The spirit told me that once I had most or all of the mirror together, I had to shake my elbow ring several times,
C3 said, taking his ring off.
I told the spirit it was enchanted to be heavy and come back to me like a boomerang. But the spirit said there was another enchantment on it from the blacksmith who made it.
Hyaktu frowned deeply. So Mimata Denoma is behind this. She did help Kaokat and the other spirits. How did you get that ring? He asked aloud.
I got it as a gift from a stranger,
C3 murmured. How? Hyaktu pressed. C3 shrugged.
I was almost to the school when this person in a hood came out of the bushes. They gave me the ring, said it was enchanted, and just left. It was odd, I admit, but how could I turn away an enchanted object? My family isn't well off,
he added in a bitter tone. C3 waited a moment, then said,
Anyway, I did what the spirit told me to do once the mirror was mostly assembled. I did not want your children and Sorella to interfere, not when I'd come so far with putting the mirror together, not after promising to help the spirit. But when I did that, all of those spirits appeared. I realized that I had been lied to.
Hyaktu nodded slowly. The spirit used you.
Yeah,
C3 muttered, his lip curling back a bit. Very well, Hyaktu said with a sigh. Is there anything else that you feel you need to tell me? Whether it relates to the mirror shards and spirits or not. C3 slumped in his chair, then said,
I stole Mint's notes on enchanting objects.
Why?
I wanted to see how to do it, and Mint presented the perfect opportunity. So I took the notes. They were useless. Even the spirit I was trying to help did not guide me.
So you did not learn how to enchant objects?
No,
C3 said dully.
I wish I had.
I once more admire your eagerness to learn, C3, but stealing from other students is not the way to go about it. Nor is helping unknown spirits, Hyaktu said seriously. C3 nodded. Now, as I said, I will not expel you, Hyaktu went on, sitting up in his chair. I'm glad to hear you weren't actually trying to get those dangerous spirits into the school. I'm going to let you off with a very serious warning, Cypress. C3 did not complain to his legal name being used. He merely nodded. I would also like you to serve meditation sessions with me for the remainder of the school year on both Saturday and Sunday to reflect what you've done. C3 nodded again. Next time, if you see anything weird, I want you to report it to me at once, Hyaktu went on. Understand?
Yes, Mr. Saihan,
C3 murmured. Very well. Hyaktu got to his feet and walked the short distance to C3. He put a hand on the boy's shoulder. After a moment, C3 looked up at him, and Hyaktu offered him a small smile. I understand none of this was intentional, Hyaktu said. I understand we all make mistakes. Don't let this define who you are. You've learned the lesson. C3 nodded. You may leave. C3 got to his feet and moved towards the door. Just give me that elbow ring of yours, Hyaktu added before he could open the door. The boy hesitated, then pulled the ring down his arm. He reluctantly handed it over to Hyaktu, then exited the room, leaving the door gaping wide behind him. Hyaktu inspected the golden ring, frowning. Kaokat, Mimata, and that possession spirit were working together. to bring in those other spirits, to take down the defenses. But why? Why does Kaokat want to get in? Why would Mimata work with them? How do they know each other? And who was the possession spirit? When Hyoktu had managed to shake the spirit out of Sorala's knives, the spirit had been in its fog-looking form, just as C3 had said. The phantom had quickly headed for the forest, leaving the knives plain again. Once sure that the knives weren't further enchanted, Hyoktu had merely added them to the Kung Fu studio. There was no point in getting rid of perfectly crafted knives, after all. Hyoktu sighed deeply and sat back down, turning the ring over in his hands. What does Kaokat want? A knock sounded on the door, and he looked up to see Jabali peering down at him. Hyoktu offered his friend a small smile.
We gotta talk,
Jabali murmured.
Admin office work for ya?
Hyoktu nodded wordlessly. He got to his feet and trailed Jabali out of the counseling office, down the admin hall, and to the admin office once more. After entering, he closed the door behind them and sat on the floor in a lotus position, his legs aching after sitting in the chair. What's on your mind? Hyoktu asked. Jabali remained standing for a moment, then sat across from him with a sigh.
You know them students likely took pictures and videos of that spirit attack, right?
Hyoktu nodded.
Word's gonna get out. This school could get shut down by the Gov. You could be seen as a criminal for allowing this to happen.
It wasn't my fault, and nobody was harmed, Hyoktu said. Well, apart from the teachers, and I'm sure my kids were a little scuffed up. But there was nothing serious, and we'll have the courtyard cleaned up in no time.
That don't matter when it comes to the Gov. You know that, Hyoktu.
Jabali murmured seriously. Hyoktu groaned and raked both of his hands through his soft hair. Yeah, I know, he uttered. But they can't shut down the school if everything is fine. The most they can do is inspect it. And we can say the spirit attack was an illusion, a magic show. Jabali looked doubtful.
Maybe it's time you shut down the school and get back to traveling. Whatever Kaokat might want, it can't be good. You and your family would be safer if you leave this place.
But the ship is damaged.
I'll pay for the repairs.
But we still need to get it to a shop, and by the time we get it there, it'll probably be summer, Hyoktu pointed out. And by the time it's all fixed up, school will probably be back in session. Besides, I can't shut down the school on all of these students.
Transfer the ownership to Khurshid,
Jabali said with a careless wave of his hand. Hyoktu crossed his arms over his chest. Wouldn't that just make me look more like a guilty criminal? To leave the school and run away with my kids? Jabali sighed.
I suppose you're right.
Hyoktu's gaze softened, and he reached his hand out to his friend's arm, feeling a scratch on his smooth skin. Jabali, I understand your concerns. I really do. I'm worried that the government will come too. But I'm confident I can keep this place open. I'll make the school take 3 years instead of 4. That way we're out of here sooner. And when my kids are done, I'll give Khurshid the school. He's the one who wanted a magic school after all. So he can have it.
Why not give it to him now?
Hyoktu shook his head. I'm not running from these problems. I'm standing my ground. Besides, I'm the one who teaches the advanced magic classes, and the martial arts, and most of the arts classes. The students need me. Jabali eyed him for a long moment, then placed his large hand over Hyoktu's.
Why do you gotta be so stubborn?
Hyoktu stuck his tongue out at his friend. Why do you always want to run away? Jabali's gaze darkened, and he shoved Hyoktu's hand away as he shifted his position.
I know when it's best to move on.
And I'll move on when it's time to move on, Hyoktu said gently, surprised at Jabali's sullen tone. But it's not time yet. Soon, but not yet. Jabali sighed.
Well, you would know best.
Besides, what would I do with Sorala? Hyoktu pointed out. I can't leave her at the school alone, especially after she's made friends with my kids. And I don't know if she'd want to go with us. if she views us as family yet.
Why not ask?
Hyaktu shook his head. Not yet, he murmured. She's been through a lot, and bringing up that stuff with Mimita is likely to leave her in a poor headspace. I don't want her choice to be tainted by memories of Mimita. Jabali nodded his understanding.
Makes sense to give her time. You think one more year of school before you travel?
Probably too.
And do you know what Kale Cat wants? Why they'd find you all these years later?
Hyaktu shook his head. No, but I'm sure we'll figure it out soon.